I want to go through three different types of accounts today. We're going to talk about three specific ones. They all are going to involve saving for your kids. So everything we're talking about today is different ways to save money for your kids, invest money for your kids. Two of them are going to be education accounts that you can use for your kids' education, and then one of them is a custodial account that we're going to talk about. So I wanted you guys to have a clear understanding of ways that you can be saving for your kids and investing for them for their future, and the benefits and drawbacks that you have of the different ways to invest. So let's first start by talking about education accounts for kids. So there are multiple ways to save for kids' education. You have 529 plans, and the one we're talking about today, 529 plans and Coverdell ESA. So Coverdell Education Savings Account for short, people say ESA. And then there are other ways as well too. There's like prepaid tuition plans that you can do with specific schools. I'm not a big fan of those things normally because you're locked into those schools and you take away some of your options. So two ways that I recommend clients to often save for kids' education is through either a 529 or a Coverdell ESA. Now they both serve different purposes and you would use them for different reasons. Specifically 529 is going to be your better bet overall for higher education. While the Coverdell ESA is a good option for if you plan to do K through 12 private school. So, that's kind of one of the main differences off the top, but I'm going to go through each of them and kind of give you a rundown of how each of them work. And then on the back end after that, we're going to talk about the custodial accounts that you can open for your kids. So 529. 529 plan. So, how do they work? What is the purpose? You're saving for your kids' education, but what are the benefits of doing it in a 529? So, when you save money, so the government essentially gives us the benefit in a 529, just as they would in a retirement account that you have. So your money that you invest, it grows tax-free, which means that you don't have to pay capital gains taxes when you're selling in and out of funds, or there's no pass-through capital gains taxes if you're in mutual funds. So it grows tax-free. There's no capital gains on the back end when you sell the funds to use as long as they are used for qualified education expenses. Then they are not taxed and there's no penalty. Now, actually very similar to an IRA, like if you were to do an early withdrawal out of an IRA, if you do use them for non-qualified expenses, then withdrawals are subject to federal tax and there will be a 10% penalty. So as long as they are used for qualified education expenses. So what is a qualified education expense for a 529? Tuition, obviously. You can do books, and then there is room and board as well. So you can either, if your kid is a student on a college campus and they're staying in the dorms, and that's really easy. You can, have that paid to the school for their dorms as well. And if they live off campus, then there's a formula that you can still use that can still oftentimes cover part of their off-campus expenses as well. And there's some caveats that you need to pay close attention to, but those would be qualified education expenses. For 529, there are no income limits and no contribution limits. So you don't have to have a certain income or be within a certain income to be able to contribute to the 529 plan for your kids. And there's no contribution limits. However, if you do gift over there will be gift tax that would apply if you gift over like the gift amount. That is, the annual limit for every year. So for 2023, that is $17,000. So you and your spouse, if you are married, you and your spouse can both contribute $17,000 per child. And then grandparents could do the same thing too. So it is a per person gift amount for your taxes, but that would be, what you would want to stick within in order to not have gift tax apply over those limits. And that amount changes every year, just so you know. That gift tax amount does change. It does go up a little bit every year, so you can pay attention as years go. But again, no income limits and no contribution limits. The other benefits of a 529 plan, a couple changes. In the last little while, as of January of 2018, actually to be specific, The government then now allows $10,000 per year per beneficiary to be used for tuition only for private school or religious K through 12 school. So you are able to use a 529 for K through 12 tuition only now at $10,000 per year per beneficiary. So that was kind of a recent change and a nice change, because otherwise 529 really was just for higher education, but that gives parents a little bit of flexibility on being able to possibly use it for K through 12 if they plan to do private school there as well. 529 is the way you set them up is by, there's a beneficiary per plan. So, you're kind of set up on the account. If you want to set this up for one of your kids, then, you can be the name on the account, and then the beneficiary would be your child. So, that money is for that beneficiary. However, you can change that beneficiary to another member of your family. There's a certain amount of times normally you can do that per year, but you can change that beneficiary. And then later on, so let's say your child does not use all the money in their 529 plan for college, you set too much aside, which is probably rare at this point with how expensive college is, but let's just say you happen to set too much aside, or they don't end up using it for some reason, they could actually hold on to it. The account never expires. They could hold on to it and change it to their kids as a beneficiary, or even their spouse as a beneficiary. So it can live on and help others in their education. Like I said, it still never expires. So even if when they're 60, they decide to go back to school, they could use it for that. Now, obviously, unlikely scenarios, but the 529 does give you a good amount of flexibility in changing beneficiaries, which is great. And then the really new thing that came just more recently was now a certain portion of excess in a 529 can now be rolled over to a Roth IRA. So that's a really good change. It kind of helped, people often get worried about, okay, how much should I contribute to this 529 account? I don't want to over contribute and have so much left over that it's just, we have too much in the account at the back end, but being able to roll that over to a Roth IRA for your student is a really big benefit. And there is a limit on that, but it's something to keep in mind. So again, like I said, if you do not use these for qualified education expenses, you're going to pay, and you take the withdrawals, you're going to pay taxes and a 10% penalty. So this is for education. You're planning on using this account for education. If you wanted more flexibility beyond education, this is not the account to be using. Also, something important to note is that a 529 can affect financial aid. So it does count as parents' asset on the FAFSA when you fill out the FAFSA if you're looking to get financial aid for your student. So that is also something to keep in mind with the 529. And like I said, you can do, it does give a little bit more flexibility for K through 12 education with being able to do $10,000 per year per beneficiary for K through 12 education. That pretty much covers the 529. Now, there are different states, one more thing actually, there are different states that offer partial tax deductions possibly, and that's at the state level. So you do want to check your state to see if you are in a state that offers tax benefits for a 529, and then you would want to do a plan within that state. I live in California, a lot of my clients are California, there is no tax benefit for California, so we can go ahead then and look for plans outside of the state to invest in, and look for decent investment options and get plans and portfolios for their 529 savings plans for their kids. So again, that's the 529. Coverdell ESA, the Coverdell Education Savings. Just to sum it up really on the broad level real quick, more often than not, you would, like I said earlier in the podcast, you would use the Coverdell ESA more for K through 12 education, and the 529 more for higher education. They're a little bit, that's kind of how they're set up. Like I said, there is some crossover. You can use that 529, 10,000 per year. And for Coverdell ESA, you can use it for higher education. So it's not locked into K through 12, but you're just gonna you can use it for more expenses for K through 12 education. So that's part of the pros of a Coverdell ESA, and just to kind of help you figure out what the slight differences would be. Coverdell ESA does grow tax-free and is not taxed on qualified education expenses, just like the 529. It can be used, like I said, for a more broad range of K through 12 expenses, and tuition, and then also for higher education. So like I said, the 529 was for tuition only. K through 12 expenses for Coverdell ESA would also be covered. So if your kid goes to a private school and they have uniforms that they have to wear, you could pay for that with that. You could pay for equipment and for books and other things that they would need for their education. So it covers more expenses for that K through 12 category. You can change the beneficiary to another member of the family with a Coverdell ESA, but there are subject to certain restrictions. So it's not probably as flexible as that, or you can't change it as often, I should say, as the 529. And then if you are able to roll over funds into a 529 from a Coverdell ESA as long as it has the same beneficiary. So that is a rollover option that you have in a Coverdell ESA. Now, a Coverdell does have contribution limits. You can do $2,000 annual limit, but there are no lifetime limits within the Coverdell ESA. And sorry, just to back up real quick, there are lifetime limits within 529s. That is something I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about 529s. There are lifetime limits, and it does depend on state. So they vary between 200,000 to about 529,000, I think, for California. But that is something to look at with your state. If you try to contribute above that lifetime limit, you'll actually just get rejected and it'll get sent back to you. Okay, so back to the Coverdell ESA, 2,000 annual limit, but there are no lifetime limits. You can no longer contribute. There are age limits on a Coverdell ESA. You can't contribute once the beneficiary is 18. And there also are income limits. So there is a phase out that starts to happen in the Coverdell ESA as well. So you'd want to pay attention to that to make sure you're not in that phase out range. Just like the 529, if you use it for non-qualified expenses, you're going to be subject to federal tax and that 10% penalty. So you want to make sure you're using this. Again, this is for education. And then the other interesting thing about the Coverdell that's different than the 529 is that funds left in the account, the account expires. So the account can't be left open beyond when the beneficiary is 30. So that is when you may want to roll it over to a 529. But funds that are left in the account when the beneficiary turns 30 must be taken out within 30 days. So it does expire. Just like the 529, the Coverdell ESA is going to affect your FAFSA. It can affect financial aid. It counts as parent assets on the FAFSA form. So that is also similar to that 529. So hopefully that gives you kind of a better idea of the differences between the two and kind of what they'd be used for. Again, to sum it up, you'd probably use the Coverdell ESA more likely for that K through 12, and then 529 more likely for higher education. So with all that information, most of my clients do 529s. That is the more likely scenario with an education account. But that Coverdell ESA can be a really good option and a possibility depending on the client. The other way that you can save for your kids for non-education is called a UTMA or a UGMA account. So just so you know what that stands for, the UTMA account is Uniform Transfer to Minors, and the UGMA account means Uniform Gift to Minors. They are very similar. They're like incredibly similar, which is why they're often used interchangeably. But it's basically it's a custodial account. So it's basically a savings account for the minor that is controlled by the adult. Basically, the goal is just to start getting money invested for your child, and it's not specifically for education. It can be used for anything. So that's one of the biggest pros. It is highly flexible. You are not locked into only using it for education. It can be used for other things. They can use it for their first car. They can use it, later on, you could use it to help pay for their wedding, or their first home, or just really anything that they want to start saving for. You're gonna fund it with cash. You can do it. And then the great thing is I actually had a UTMA account when I was growing up. And once I got old enough and started working, it was like, and my dad was a financial advisor, so he was able to explain to me kind of how the mutual funds worked and that this account was for me. And so when I started babysitting, I would save a certain amount of money that I had and I would put it into my UTMA account. And when the market would go down, I'd get super excited because, hey, like I get more shares, like everything's on sale, and I'd put as much as I can in and contribute as well. So it's also something you can kind of teach your kids about, and it's a good way to teach them about investing when they start working and earning money, really for anything, mowing the lawn, whatever kids do to earn money, and then they can contribute to the account too. So I find UTMA accounts to be a really good way to start teaching your kids about saving and investing. I find 529 education accounts to be a really good way for grandparents to gift for their kids, and UTMA accounts are a really cool way for kids to start learning about saving and investing. There are no contribution limits on a UTMA or UGMA. They don't have, again, no contribution limits, no income limits. You can gift to it at any time. You can put money in at any time. Gifts are irrevocable. So if they are gifts that you are using for the kids, it's irrevocable. It can't be transferred. It has to stay for that minor. That account is for that minor, and it needs to, the money that comes out of there would be for the benefit of that minor. Depending on the state you live in and depending on how you set up the plan, the child will eventually reach the age of majority in this account. So the adult is the custodian until the child reaches the age of majority. And whatever that age of majority is set for that account, whether it be 18, 21, 25, 26, that child will then take over the account. The adult will come off of the account registration. It will become an individual account in that child's name, and it will be their money. So that is something that can be set up on the front end of the account. You can set up that specific age that you feel comfortable with your child taking it over, and then it becomes their account at that point in time. It actually can affect the financial aid as well, actually. So it's interesting about the UTMA account because it belongs to the child on the FAFSA. So it can actually affect their financial aid that they would get for school. And there's no benefit to using it for school. So you don't get the same tax-free growth and all of that like you would in the education account. So it is different. It is taxed differently than an education account, but it's more flexible and it can be used for anything. So oftentimes parents will use possibly both if they have the means to save for their child. In both ways, they will save for their education, and then they will have the UTMA account to also be saving for outside their education, and also for their child to contribute to. So there's different. They both serve a different purpose, and you can use both for saving for the child. And again, like I said, I find it really helpful to use that UTMA account to start teaching your kids about saving and investing, and they can kind of start getting their feet wet so they can understand more when they're older. All of these, and any way you go about this, depending on your income, obviously, and your goals for your kids, any of these are huge just ways and great ways to set your kid up to start ahead and not behind, whether it's education and they don't have to take on debt for college, or whether it is the UTMA account and maybe they get to use it for their down payment. Either way, both of these options, or even a combination of them, are great ways to set your kids up ahead, and also just really good ways to teach your kids about investing. So I wouldn't say there's any of these that are like my favorite over the others. It is very situational, and it does depend on your goals and what you're trying to do. But even the fact that you have the heart to save for your kids is very cool, and you're going to change generations by being proactive with your kids' savings. So I hope that gives you a little bit better understanding of how to save for your kids, how to invest for your kids. And if you have any other further questions about these accounts or how you should be doing them or how much you should be putting in, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. And yeah, I hope you guys all have a great day.